Legal experts are raising the prospect of the federal government's controversial community sports infrastructure grant program being unconstitutional. Political reporter Matthew Doran has more from Parliament House.
This is the program that we've heard so much about over the last few days following that scathing report from the Auditor-General into the Community Sport Infrastructure Grants Program, a $100 million program that was rolled out in the last 6 months or so before the federal election in May last year. The Auditor-General, of course, found that the then Sports Minister Bridget McKenzie had ignored advice from Sport Australia and that her and her office had put in place their own criteria for awarding grants to sporting clubs around the country. It also found that those grants were disproportionately awarded to clubs in marginal coalition seats. Where we're looking at today in terms of these legal concerns is whether or not the Commonwealth even had the right or the power under the nation's founding document to put in place such a scheme. Constitutional experts, including Anne Twomey from the University of Sydney, have said that the way in which the legislation was drafted, Sport Australia should have been the organisation making the final decision about where grants were going rather than the Minister Bridget McKenzie. And Professor Twomey on ABC News Breakfast this morning was also questioning whether or not the Commonwealth needs to even get itself involved in community grants programs. She says there is no express power in the Constitution to make legislation regarding sports, and she has presented something of a talking point as we move forward on this debate today.
The Commonwealth might rely on what's sometimes called its nationhood power, but that means you either need some kind of a national emergency, like the bushfires or the global economic crisis, resurfacing an oval, not really a national emergency, or it has to be something that peculiarly only the Commonwealth can do and the states are unable to do. And we know that the states can and do give out sports grants. So it doesn't seem to fit either of those, which means that there's a bit of a problem in terms of supporting this program.
So what sort of support is Bridget McKenzie getting from her colleagues, Matt?
Well, the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, is standing by the Deputy Nationals leader. She is no longer the Sports Minister, but he is standing by her as a member of his ministry. He continues to say that she has acted within the rules, despite the fact that he has appointed his Attorney-General, Christian Porter, to look into some of the issues around that legal authority that the Auditor-General raised in his report into the scheme. It is interesting to point out a comment this morning from fellow Nationals Minister Darren Chester. He says that there are concerns about how governments award grants under schemes like this, and there does need to be a change in how governments operate to ensure that people are confident their taxpayer dollars are being spent appropriately.
The integrity of the way we deliver these types of programs needs to have the transparency that people can have confidence that a fair system is in place. So I've said that in the past, and I stand by those comments, because people need to have confidence when they make a bid for a program that it's being assessed, and increasing the transparency, I think, will be good for us as politicians at local, state and federal level to restore that trust with our voters.
Okay. Nationals Minister Darren Chester speaking earlier on News Breakfast. So this issue will continue to develop as more questions are raised, including about whether a club in the Prime Minister's own electorate of Cook in the Sutherland Shire of Sydney was eligible for funding. The Prime Minister's office says it indeed was, but Labor will be prosecuting the argument today that this is another example of where this grants process has gone wrong.